afternoon to everybody. We start with this session of this day for our conference on creativity and algorithms. We have here Lev Manovich. Welcome, Lev. He's currently presidential professor at the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. Founder and director of the Cultural Analytics Lab, and his work explores software aesthetics, data visualization, and the impact of digital technologies on contemporary art and perception. He authored the seminal book, The Language of New Media, 2001, and very recently he wrote, together with Emanuele Arielli, the book, which gives also the title to this intervention at this conference, Artificial Aesthetics, Generative AI, Art and Visual Media, which deals with the role of generative AI in reshaping artistic imagination, authorship, and the contemporary visual ecology. You are very welcome, Lev Manovich. And he's in conversation with Emanuele Arielli here at the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. So it will be kind of informal, Lev. So the aim is just to speak freely about our book, about your and my project, but mostly yours projects. And well, I will just lead with some questions and some discussion. I will begin with some consideration about the book. I don't know how many people in the public now are familiar with the book. We published chapter after chapter from 2021 to last year, with long pauses because we began the book as the topic was not that important, not very well known. The connection between art, aesthetics, and artificial intelligence back then was a very niche topic, but I was interested to work with Lev because he already wrote a small booklet about AI aesthetics, which was very interesting for me. And then we began to write chapter after chapter. At the same time, there was this explosion of popularity due to the new technology. So we also made kind of a pause, a break to see what was happening, so to say. Particularly, Lev also worked with these technologies also as a practitioner, as an artist, and I observed the process more from a theoretical point of view. The book has been translated in Spanish shortly, a couple of weeks ago by Akal publisher. And then it's going to be translated in Chinese, Korean, and Japanese. And I'm doing also the Italian translation. As I said also yesterday, I was too optimistic about automatic translation in Italian, but it's not that good. No? So I'm actually working personally on the translation, which will make the publication day will shift it more later in the time because I cannot trust AI for this work. Well, one point of interest in this joint work between me and Lev is that we had very long discussions in these years about several topics that few also converged in the text in the chapters, and we mostly agree on the most parts. But I don't know if you are always agreeing. So we have also different perspectives or different ideas about several topics, and this is good because I think the book itself is a kind of dialogue, no? And I learned a lot from Lev because just from my perspective, which is aesthetics, I've learned also very important thing to see aesthetics from the point of view of a media theorist, of an artist, of someone very expert on new media, because I think personally one problem with aesthetics is that aestheticians, as philosophers dealing with aesthetics, are kind of afraid of talking about very basic topics of aesthetics, like what is an artwork, what is beauty, what is aesthetics. We are kind of shy about thinking on these topics, no? Because we want, probably because we don't want to expose ourselves too much on speaking about what is actually beauty. We hide behind lots of theories and lots of authors. Well, so I will begin. I don't want to speak too much because it's not about me, but it's mostly about your work, Lev. I will begin with a question. So, what is for you working with and about artificial intelligence in the context of image and art production, and what is your take on this? So just tell us freely, what are your thoughts about this?
Sure. Me and Emanuele actually met in 2019, so it's over 6 years ago, and we gradually realized that we share so many things in common, right? Our kind of interest in aesthetics, and also both Emanuele and me, have read quite a lot, I think, in the field of psychology of the arts and cognitive science, and of course, Emanuele also brings his knowledge of kind of philosophy of aesthetics and this historical tradition, whereas in my case, I kind of bring my experience as a both traditional artist. I was first trained as a painter since the age of 13, and when I studied architecture, studied filmmaking and animation, and also worked in computer animation and visual effects, motion graphics for about 6 years. Right, so I bring this kind of practical, hands-on perspective, and also my experience thinking and writing about all development of kind of media arts and digital creative tools. Right. So I think for me, I come from a perspective of practitioner, right, from a perspective of somebody who first was using oil paints, right, and then first saw computer graphics in '82, right, over 40 years ago, and realized that one day this new digital media will be as popular as photography, and also realizing that perhaps in 20 years or so I'll be able just to sit in my room and kind of make movies. Right, so basically my intense interest and also practical, right, in digital creative tools. So from this perspective, right, somebody who has been using computers, right, in a variety of ways to make art, and also writing about other people, right, writing about my colleagues who are artists. Of course, generative AI is amazing, right, unbelievable, breathtaking creative tool, right? So the ability to try new ideas very quickly, right, is unprecedented, right? The fact that you can try, dozens of ideas in one day. And of course, not all of them. In fact, most of them are not going to work, right? But some will work. And then, of course, you can do in the course of minutes, you can do something which will take you, normally days and or weeks, right? So this is incredible. Now, in terms of what you can do and what you can't do, right? So we need a kind of progress, right? So over time, various AI models, including image models, right, are becoming better, and the research community has developed, in fact, a number of tests, right, a number of criteria how we compare performance of the models, right? So one of them is like photorealism, because generation of believable generative photographs is kind of very important, right, for the industry. For creative industry. The second, for example, how well the model can interpret your prompt, right? So if you're describing some complex scene, do you actually get, right, what you describe? Spatial cohesion, right? Are the objects positioned correctly? Are things in perspective? Are there any mistakes? And so on and so forth, right? So there's like 5 or 6 different kind of criteria. And again, there is a kind of, even though the models can generate things in, thousands, right, different visual styles, and we can simulate almost every possible visual media, and also combine this media in new combinations. There is a kind of big focus, right, on photographic realism. So then, in terms of my actual experience, right, using these models, so let's say, right, I have various ideas which I want to try. Either I want to make still images, or I want to make moving images. So recently I started to slowly work on parts of what I hope will become animated films. This is what I observe, right? So some ideas work out kind of perfectly, right? That's great. So it's again similar to conventional maybe artistic process. You have like an image in your head, and then you realize this image. Only it happens, right, much quicker. Right. So that's one path. The second thing is, right, AI is doing something, and it gives you something which is quite different or significantly different from what you imagined, but it is equally interesting or more interesting, right? I would say very often it's more interesting. So from this perspective, I would say that AI is actually more creative than humans, than human artists. It's more skillful. I mean, very few artists can represent such complex scenes in a variety of media. In fact, I think almost no people in the art world can do it, because we don't get this kind of training. Only maybe people who work for Disney or kind of Hollywood or Pixar, right? Or like we do commercial illustration. Only people who work in creative industry have this training, and not so many. Right? So that's the second path, right? You get something, but it's not actually what you expected, but it's equally interesting when you start like pushing AI more, etc., etc. Right? And then there's a kind of third possibility, which also happens very often. I mean, you have an idea, right? You write a prompt. Maybe you also give a model some images to use as reference, to use as style reference, as a composition reference, right, etc. And you get something which is not satisfying, not interesting, kind of boring, and simply just not good enough. And you try, and whatever it is you try, it doesn't work. And there's probably a way to get it done, but we are limited, right? In our creativity, we are limited in terms of our time. So maybe I just can't figure out how to do it, and then I just give up, right? So from this perspective, I can't say that AI can do anything you can imagine or anything you can conceive. And maybe that's because I have very strict, right, aesthetic criteria, since I've been practically in the arts for 50 years. So I would say so in my case, maybe I can only realize 10 or 20% of my ideas, right, and not the rest, right? So definitely at this point, it's not capable of everything. Maybe it will can get to this point in a few years. That's kind of hard to say, because it also depends, how these models are trained, right? At the moment, like the companies are all competing, right, for kind of billions of customers, for billions of users, which means every big model, right, from Midjourney, ChatGPT, Google, right, etc. We're all trained to be like a Swiss knife, right, to be able to do everything. And then you can fine-tune these models on particular data sets, but it also doesn't work. But I think what we're going to see in the future, and we're already seeing it actually, this process already started, is people training or fine-tuning many particular models which specialize in particular style or particular type of content, right? Or even particular tasks, like putting type on the simulated, product, right? Or, doing something else, right? So we'll kind of get these tools which will be not capable of everything, but not be able to do many things well, but specifically kind of fine-tuned to do particular things. So I think that's enough for my answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't know if there are questions also from the public or from my colleagues. I have some, of course, but also Elena, if you want to ask something.
Yes. I was wondering if you could explain something more about your last sentences. You said AI is more creative as humans.
Yeah.
In the meantime, if I remember well, in the book, in chapter 4 of your book, of your shared book, you said that the idea of creativity, the connection of the idea of creativity with art must change, because probably it should become weaker and weaker in the future. But in this case, you used this term to refer to AI.
Yes. Well, so I think so. But it's right. There's a whole discipline of creativity studies, or psychology of creativity. Right. One can go to Wikipedia. It's like there's like hundreds of references. Right. So it's a big field. It started somewhere in the 40s, and in this field, people have because we're psychologists, right, or social scientists, and of course, social scientists always try to develop some test, right, to measure something. That's how we justify our idea that we're scientists. So we have developed certain tests to measure certain kinds of creativity, right, but not any kind of creativity. So in the last few years, we have seen, right, a number of scientific papers being published in top journals, which actually kind of compare the creativity, right, of, let's say, a group of humans, and then compare this to creativity of different AI models. So usually we compare it to different models, right? From Facebook, from Google, etc. And then using this test, we can actually measure it, right? And I think the result, which I saw consistently in like 22, 23, was that even if you compare, right, AI models to like professionals, professional doctors, professional scientists in particular field, professional writers, right? Surprisingly, I haven't seen any paper which would compare AI like to some group of artists, illustrators, animators. Not sure why, right? But in terms of these other kind of professions, usually the result was that AI is right, and then there are also tests like to score the performance, right? So usually AI was better than like 90 or 95%, right, of human participants, but there were also always like a few participants who were better than AI, right? So sometimes 95%, sometimes 98%, sometimes 93%. So that's that was basically, let's say, objective proof. In my own experience, right, it's kind of more tricky, right? Because I feel that AI is sort of, right, there's a potential there, right? And almost like, if virtually it's more creative than me, right? It's more creative than my colleagues, but I have to have all my experience of 50 years doing art and 35 years publishing and spending my whole life, right, studying culture, going to museums, observing trends, right? Because I know how to write interesting prompts, right? I know how to ask for interesting things, and then I get, I think, very interesting answers, right? But if person doesn't know what to ask for, right, you're not going to get interesting answers. Right, so that's why it's kind of very, very hard to answer this question kind of in a simple way, right? I feel that AI is amazingly creative, more creative than me, but it doesn't work if I'm not around to kind of provoke its creativity.
You have to give a motivation to be creative. Because
well, I have to know what to ask for. In other words, I have to say, okay, now you have to talk like on that level, right, as opposed to the level of some beginning high school students.
At least in psychology, creativity is very well connected with motivation and drive. And AI system, they don't have any drive, so you have to give some input to make them move. This is one point, of course, more speculative. But connected to this question and this discussion, I'm not completely sure. Of course, it depends on the definition of creativity, which is not an easy task. There is a big discussion. In philosophy, in psychology, and so on. But sometimes I wonder if it's really like this, because if I think about, I'm more focused on text because I use mostly large language models, ChatGPT or Claude, and so on. And I have the impression the system is very good concerning the capacity to write text. Anyway, in foreign languages that are foreign for me, it's more advanced, and sometimes also in my own native language, it can find better formulation and so on. But it doesn't give me particularly new ideas. So I have the impression, for instance, concerning language, the AI is not really creative. I have to give the ideas, otherwise it's just trivial what it produced. And
Yes.
maybe it's more creative from the point of view of formulation, of form, of style. So the question is maybe is a higher creativity concerning the realization of the object, in this case text, or the style, but not of the basic idea. I don't know what's your
not a basic structure. Well, it's very possible, but I think it also depends, right? Like, what you measure in what field. So when I say that, the psychologists in the field of creativity studies, we kind of measure the performance of AI among humans. I remember one paper, where we took, I don't know, 50 or 200, I don't remember, scientists in a particular scientific field. And we asked them to come up with kind of new ideas how to research something, right? And then we ask AI to do the same things, and AI simply created, right? AI thought of many more possibilities than scientists, right? And then you can actually measure it in terms of so in this case, creativity means variety of different ideas focused on a particular topic, right? So that's an example how it can be more creative in terms of content, right, and not only form. But one thing I was hoping we can talk a little bit about, right, since we had nice exchange yesterday over email, is about kind of different meanings of aesthetics today, and also in relationship to AI, because of course also that's how our book is called, right? And I think many people get confused because they assume that artificial aesthetics means that AI, enforces or encourages one particular aesthetic, and this is not actually what we meant. So if it's of interest to you, I would like to spend some minutes talking about it.
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking about our conversation yesterday again is in the common sense, we have an understanding of aesthetics as mostly something concerning form, something concerning style, form, appearance, which is also the original definition of the concept of aesthetics. And on the other side, when we connect it to, let's say, to art, now we have always this problem in contemporary time that basically art and aesthetics are far away apart, so to say, and not concerning with beauty, which is always something which is not very well accepted from the perspective of contemporary creative art, so to say, because doing something which is aesthetically beautiful or pleasant is considered like a kind of production of kitsch or something which is just pleasurable and not meaningful. No? You don't have meanings, but then we fall in the old discussion about all of this. But I think in the present discussion concerning artificial aesthetics, probably there is this aspect of AI systems which are very good in producing something which is aesthetically high from a formal point of view. But that's not necessarily only this, because I think coming back to language models, you can also dialogue with AI system on a more symbolic level and a level of also of conceptual meaning of some ideas or some aspects. So actually, it's not just AI aesthetics or artificial intelligence interesting just for appearance or for images, for style, but also for content. This is one aspect. But a question which I posed directly to you, coming from our discussion yesterday, is in this strive for perfection. You mentioned Midjourney, which is a system which is refined to generate images that are maybe not close to the prompt, or they don't aim to interpret your prompt correctly, but more they are trained to generate aesthetically perfect images. The question is, isn't there the risk that these systems make us converge to a kind of uniform aesthetics?
Sure. Yeah. This is, of course, a big question which comes up, I know you have something, I don't know, in your screen. I don't see it in front of my face. Not sure what. But okay. Oh, okay. It's interactive. Okay, good. Well, so I think this is a question which often comes up, right, when there's a new technology which is introduced in society. Partly because when I think new technology is being introduced to society, right, usually it's capable of something very, very new and different, but it also has lots of limitations, and therefore, at the early period with development, it has a particular aesthetic. So think about development of cinema, right? Like 1890s, right? You have this Edison kinetoscope, right, where you put money and you kind of look right into a particular device, and you see maybe 30-second loop, right? So there are these attractions and very simple subjects, right, and kind of particular loops, and also the aesthetics of like cinema in 1900s is very much of a theater, right? So the action is organized kind of parallel, right? Like on a stage, the actors appear, disappear from left and right, and then in 1910, the cinema gradually develops its own language, the language of editing, right? Kind of back and forth. The camera is now inside the virtual space. And then 1920s, you have montage, etc., etc., and it develops, lots of different kind of possibilities. Okay? So, I can make the same example of Instagram. So I think Instagram in the first few years often also led to the development of particular aesthetics, which had to do with resolution of the phone, right? With like the fact that you're looking at a kind of small screen, the fact that you're looking very quickly, and if a professional kind of photography is about very complex images, right? Very deep images, got deep focus, almost like 19th century kind of paintings, right? The Instagram aesthetics, at least in the beginning, was about images which are more flat, which are more graphic. You have new genres like a flat lay, etc., etc., right? So I have never wrote about it, but I think that what happens very often, right, when new technology appears, and it comes both with new possibilities, but also various limitations, and because of this combination of possibilities and limitations, a particular aesthetics or multiple aesthetics become popular, but then gradually, they're replaced by something else, maybe where there's more variety. And I think we may be seeing the same things with generative AI images. But I think also we have to ask, right, who is using them? Because today, right, they're used by tens of millions of people, generative AI tools in creative industry, architects, filmmakers, animators, fashion designers, illustrators, etc., etc., right? And we use these AI images to solve particular problems, right? Let's say a photographer needs to extend background of her photographs and so on, right? So they use millions of times every day. And the aesthetics, right? I mean, we don't kind of lead to particular aesthetics. The aesthetics already exist. The aesthetics of particular styles of animation, the aesthetics of, let's say motion graphics, the aesthetics of different fashion designers, right? So here AI is used as a particular tool. But mostly this use is invisible, right? We don't see it. What we do see when we search for AI images on the internet is so-called AI slop, right? Which are infinite number of images kind of generated by non-professional users, or at least people who are not in creative industry. And then you get these images which are kind of, let's say, in bad taste, right? Which are kitschy, which are kind of surrealistic, etc., etc. And we have to ask, like, where do these aesthetics come from? And it definitely doesn't come from the tools themselves. Right? It basically comes from the imagination, right? From a mind of this, hundreds of millions or tens of millions of creators who are already influenced by, popular films, animation, cartoons, video games, and so on and so forth, right? So the reason lots of people generate AI images which show you different creatures, or some heroes, right, or some dragons, is because, we're influenced by imagery of visual games, right? So here again, AI is actually not bringing its own sort of imagery, I think these aesthetics come from outside, and and this is, and I think this is also the difference, right, between generative AI and earlier visual media tools. Because, for example, in Cinema Pure, Cinema was able to do something which nobody did before, right? You basically can, right, create, you can capture reality, right, 24 frames per second, and you have periods of movement, and this media didn't exist before. Right? AI is very different, right? AI, right, is designed within the context of our very mature, right, very sophisticated culture industry. And the way these models are designed, they're designed, right, to be the tools for people who already, right, make images, animations, do fashion design, and so on. So it's not designed to be avant-garde, right? It's not designed to give us something new. It's designed to kind of solve the existing problems and to fit in with existing aesthetics in our society. Where aesthetics by music videos again, or Hollywood feature animations, or particular different types of video games, and so on and so forth, right? So we can say that it's inherently a kind of conservative tool, and even though at the same time it's so capable and so breathtaking, right? So that's kind of one difference between AI and the kind of previous media technologies.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I don't know.
One more question. Yes, you spoke about imagination. I was thinking about an essay by Theodor Adorno, who once spoke speaking about functionalisms in architecture. Yes, he said that every medium, every art has its own imagination, so to say. So there is an architecture imagination, a pictorial imagination, and so on. So thinking about in general medium imagination, how would you describe the AI imagination?
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's an interesting question, but like I don't think I've read this essay by Adorno, right? So I don't know exactly what he meant by architect's imagination or paint imagination. If you can explain it, then maybe I can try to answer this in relation to AI.
Yes, it means that there is not a creative imagination in abstract. There is a knowledge at the basis of your imagination, so that you can find a solution, exactly, an architectural solution, for example, for instance.
Well, I think in the case of AI, I see kind of AI, right, as the next stage in the development of the internet, right, which begins over 30 years ago, after 93, after the invention of the first graphic browser. So during these 30 years, right, the humanity has kind of poured, right, endless number of kind of pieces of cultural content in different media, sounds, text, images, videos online. And of course, during this time, also all the cultural production has moved to digital workflow, right? Which means that, again, endless examples of professional cultural productions were already created digitally, so it's very easy to put them online. And also we have distribution online, Netflix, and so on and so forth, right? And, first, we kind of wanted to search for it and find something, right? Because it's such a kind of big scale. So you can't use traditional kind of directories or hierarchical catalog systems. So this is one effect of this accumulation of media online, is the switch from hierarchical knowledge organization to search engines, right, around 99, Google and so on, right? And then, let's say, another effect, which is not only connected to it, but kind of connected, is the emergence of data science in the late 2000s. Right? So data science is kind of focusing on working with big data, not only big internet data, but including big internet data, right? Trying to find patterns, trying to kind of find clusters, and so on and so forth, right? And then we have generative AI, which slowly begins to develop, right, towards the second part of 2010. And generative AI is doing something else, right? It says, well, there is so much there's so much examples, right? Instances of different type of content online that we can kind of build with artificial neural networks, which would extract automatically kind of patterns in particular type of content, right? Even synthesize new objects, new cultural objects with the same kind of properties, right? In the same style. So that's, that's kind of historically kind of what happens. So since these networks are being trained, right, on kind of big parts, right, of the internet. So in the case of large language models, I think we're already using something like 75% of all existing text, right, on the internet. I mean, in the case of image models, it's a bit less. So we use usually a few 100 million images, or sometimes even a few billion. And because the scale is smaller, we also choose. Let's say we say, okay, I really want to create AI tool, which will make images which are highly aesthetic, highly accomplished, right, very satisfying kind of in terms of form. So specifically, I will, train AI images which was scored by kind of professionals or by users as having high aesthetics, right? You don't just choose anything. This is what we do at the journey, right? But in general, right, the imagination, so to speak, right? So to speak, speaking metaphorically, right?
Yes.
The imagination of AI models is limited by their training data, right? And this is very important. So what it means, for example, if I'm, let's say, recently, right, I'm using my images, which are stylized like drawings or paintings, even trying to animate them using AI. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But let's say I took the image, which is very completely abstract, and I wanted it to be animated, and nothing happens at all. Why? Because of course, with AI, video tools are trained mostly, right, on video, right, on kind of video as opposed to some 20th century, animation, right, or like abstract animation. So it will be much harder, right? So in general, we can say that imagination of AI, right, is not distributed evenly, so to speak, right? So some things AI can imagine very, very easily and very, very perfectly. Some things are harder, and some things it can't imagine at all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to add one thing very quickly. As an external observer, because I'm not an artist, but I had the impression there was a kind of shift from the beginnings. Beginnings means 21, 22, when these, for instance, GAN technology or generative AI began. And today, kind of shift, because at the beginning there was more a fascination from the aesthetic value in the imperfection of this media. Like strange images, surreal imaginary of strange bodies generated by AI, particularly adversarial networks. And then now the tool is so perfect that the artist, I think, or the practitioner, designer, wanted to work according to their intention. So it's like a shifted this interest or fascination toward the technology.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So in a way, if we're talking about like the aesthetics of particular technological media, is already try to develop this idea, like it seems to be that this aesthetics exists in the beginning, right? And this has do both of new possibilities and the limitations of tools, and the same thing goes to photography, right? Or, early cinema or, television, etc., etc. And then it kind of dissolves as the tool becomes more capable, right? And especially it's true for computer, because let's remember that by definition, right? Think about Turing, right? The computer is a machine which is designed to simulate, right, a huge number of other machines, right? Or think about definition of algorithm, right? Algorithm is a finite number of steps, right, to solve, right, all kinds of problems. So the computer doesn't have its own identity, right? The computer, it's a machine which simulates all kinds of existing machines. And the same thing, I think, is true for, let's say, early digital tools, Photoshop or very digital painting program, right? And the same is true for AI today, right? So in a way, when we call the book Artificial Aesthetics, it was sort of, right, a bit ironic, because now, right, as I said, when we started writing book 21, 22, the AI aesthetics kind of existed, but today maybe it doesn't exist, as it became really like a Swiss knife, capable of not everything, but capable of lots and lots of different things.
Yeah.
We ask if
If
are there questions
from public
to
maybe.
put to
Otherwise,
Lev?
I
Maybe
add something more.
maybe from people who's connected. We don't know.
But then I just take advantage
Okay.
of the silence
Yes.
and add with a further question, because also we have today in our talks later also artists who participated also in the were part of the exhibition organized by Antonio Somaini, in Paris, who ended in September. And it was, I have also the impression in the selection of Antonio's artists and works and presentation, you have today more this interest, particularly in the artist domain of artists working not only with AI, but also like manipulating AI, exploring the limits of AI, maybe
Totally.
in some cases also trying to take advantage of the system, of make some problematic aspect like the usual bias and so on emerge. So maybe we can
Yes.
say that also the arts world interest on this instrument is shifting and changing this direction.
Yeah. Well, what I would say is that actually, yeah, it's a very good point. And there is a particular bias here, right? The bias of intellectuals, the bias of art world. So a couple of weeks ago, like there was a conference here, one-day conference here in Seoul about kind of collecting digital art, right? And I heard a talk of somebody I know for like 35 years. So she's one of the most internationally well-known curators, right, of digital art. She's actually curator of digital art in a major modern art museum. And in her talk, right, she made it very clearly that for her digital art, or for her like AI art, right, she said, if art is simply using AI as a tool, I'm not interested. For me, this is not digital, this is not AI art. So for her, AI art, right, I mean, artwork can only be called AI art if artists are kind of probing AI systems, if we're talking about its technology, its history, its ideology, and so on. In other words, it's a kind of meta art, which is art about AI, right? And this is, I assume, that many of these artworks, this kind of artworks, is what you also saw in the Antonio Somaini exhibitions. And to me, there's a problem here, and I will try to briefly explain what the problem is. Right, so I've been in the kind of, let's say, field of media art or digital art for, right? I mean, I made my first computer images like in 84, right? So basically over 40 years. And I also, right, spend, lots of energy writing, right, about this history of these technologies, so their archaeology and their ideology and their biases, their limitations, and so forth. And I also made many artworks, which often dealt with subjects. And the problem is that these technologies keep developing, right? So whatever is AI today is different what AI was 3 years ago, and in 2 or 3 years it can be completely different. And there's certain limitations are no longer there. The biases also disappear and so on. And the world moves on. And what I realized, after being 30, 35 years in the field of media art, is that if you do work which is really focused, which is not about, I don't know, sensibility or love or variety of human emotions or other subjects, right? In other words, something which is outside of technology. But if you only do work which is focused on technology as the subject, like this work may attract lots of attention at the moment, but usually, in most cases, it doesn't survive very well, right? So after some decades, it just becomes not interesting, right? So let's say, can you imagine that 10 years from now, somebody would be interested in some artworks which were kind of criticizing AI in 2022? Probably not, right? Unless those artworks have like amazing aesthetics and we have some content, or we're kind of creating some experience which is really on the level of top contemporary artists. So I think that while today, right, if you want to be considered for these exhibitions of AI art, right, you kind of have to, right, make art which is about AI, so you can get some gains in the short term. I'm not sure the strategy is useful in the long term, right? So recently I started making images again, right? And I'm really trying to my best to make images and animations which actually do use AI as a tool, which means that we will not be picked up by curators for exhibitions, but maybe later on will be picked up by our curators, right? Perhaps, right? Not by AI curators. So I think this is very important, right? And the point which also applies to the earlier moments in the history of media arts as well, right?
Thank you for your clear answer. I don't know if we have.
I think we can, if there are no questions, I think we can thank Lev Manovich. Many thanks for being with us, and thanks to Emanuele Arielli for leading the conversation with him and about the book Artificial Aesthetics: Generative AI, Art and Visual Media, 2024. They co-authored in several years.
I wanted to add also that I think the format that Lev introduced of publishing online the book is very good, because it's just an ongoing conversation, like our mail exchanges, our ideas develops. So it's not just the book is finished and that's just our ideas and that's it, but also just as the technology developed, also our ideas developed, and maybe we will add things and make part of our conversation, private conversation, public or maybe not. And I think that's
many thanks again, Lev, for being
out for this. Thank you again,
at the
Lev.
conference.
Maybe I just add a couple of minutes to what Emanuele said. Yes, well, I'm glad that you came to like kind of my method, right? Because I kind of insisted, right, that we use this method of just putting the chapters online as we write them. And Emanuele, thanks to him, he went along, and I think it worked out very, very well. Because as you said, like we almost had this intuition where the first chapter came out at the end of 21, and then this explosion, right, of generative AI happened in 22. So we just kind of managed, right, to kind of be part of the storm and to ride this wave, and I think to produce text which was I think also very useful to practitioners. And I think I'm not saying that everything has to be published this way. And if you're writing some book about something about 19th century or some historical stuff, or maybe some area in philosophy where things don't change so dramatically, it's completely okay if the book comes out a few years later. But if you want to be a participant, right, in this technocultural development and actually play a role in them, I mean, I do think that kind of publishing things online, quickly, right, is very important. It doesn't simply means putting things on our website like we did, but there are also lots of journals which kind of put things online, right, which have like online publications as opposed to not. And I think it also worked out in our case, right, because now I look at my email, I look at Instagram, I think everybody talks about creative AI, right? Every art school, every architecture school, every museum. And I feel very nice that we were like the first ones to very quickly kind of finish a book about this topic. And this is also why the book has been translated into 5 languages. So maybe if we waited and gave it to traditional publisher and it would take 3 years to get it published, then it wouldn't have this effect. So I encourage our people to do that kind of stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.